E.M. Ike Parker. "Both of us together painted thousands of pictures in 30 years, said Frank Chaney, a longtime friend of Ike Parker. Elliot Major Ike Parker was a self-taught artist who was born in between Montrose and Deepwater in 1912. He is responsible for organizing the first fine arts show in Clinton in the 1960s. As a boy, Ike and his friend Frank would go down to Marshall's Creek and Deepwater Creek to hunt. They were utilitarian visits. Frog and squirrel were often on the dinner table. But even at that age, both friends would have a set of watercolors in their hip pockets and use water from the creeks to moisten their mediums. Any place you look, said Ike, there is a picture to paint. Parker gravitated to building and landscape subjects, and he used his talents to record what would soon be a vanished landscape in Henry County, the land the Truman Lake Reservoir would cover over a 5-county area. Parker himself had a cabin in the 1960s on the Osage River that is now underwater. Ike served in the Navy in World War II. Even there, he took his watercolors with him. There's a story of how he would paint Christmas cards and such for the service members to send home to their wives and families. In all, however, he sketched more than painted while in the war and produced 50 sketches of many scenes he visited, from a street scene in Honolulu to a bombarded village on the Marshall Islands. He even sketched his shipmates on the fantail of the USS Rainier, the ship he served on. He only produced 5 watercolors of scenes in the South Pacific. Coming back home to Clinton in 1947, he married Wilma Dean in 1948 and continued his work. By the 1970s, many of his pieces had been shared as far afield as England. He was featured in an article in the Kansas City Star, and many of his pieces were on display at art shows around the state. One of his proudest displays was the one at the Truman Visitor Center. It's a bit scary being viewed by 1 million people a year, he had commented at one time. Parker was an on-scene artist, and at times could be seen with his palette and watercolors, seated with his subject in view. The outdoors is my studio, he said. But the early 1960s, he became very prolific in his production of paintings. His goal was to record the landscape that would soon be covered by Truman Lake. At times, he would produce 2 paintings per day. They're tearing down things faster than I can paint them. I'll paint a bridge and then it seems like the next day it's gone, he said in 1975. Parker was a carpenter and a cabinet maker by trade, and that is how he made his living. Although he sold many of his paintings, it was never for much money. He had commented at one time that it paid for the supplies he used. Interestingly, Parker started out trying to record the landscapes in oil rather than watercolor. However, he quickly grew frustrated at particles of dust and bits of leaves that would stick to his paintings as he drove home. His solution was to switch to watercolor. The Henry County Museum has many of Ike Parker's original paintings. Many of his subjects can no longer be visited as they are underwater. Ike would often carry his supplies to the location in a cardboard box and use a TV tray for his materials and sit in a folding wooden chair. Sometimes he would sit on the ground. Weather was not an issue. He once painted the Osceola Dam in the snow. Unlike commissioned painters to the area, Ike took no grants and didn't need an atlas. He was familiar with the territories he was painting. Ike Parker died in 1995. He once said, "Some of the scenes I've painted don't have the glamour or significance to the rest of the world, but to people who have lived here, they have a lot of worth and sentimental value. That's what's important to me."